What's up? Welcome to the Squad Show live tampering edition. And I think the prospects of a Jonathan Grenard trade got a little less appetizing.
What's going on? Luke Inman at Luke_Spidman. Ed Ingram just got $13 million per year. At this point, the jokes just write themselves.
I'm Tyler Fornes of ADZ Sports, and I have just signed my French Bulldog Odie to a new 3-year contract. Was he worth the price?
Skol! It's the Viking Squad. Everything Minnesota Vikings, every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the land of 10,000 lakes. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. It's time to gear up. The Viking Squad Show starts now.
Hello, happy Monday. It's one of my favorite days of the year, Legal Tampering Day. The tampering window opened 6 minutes ago, and we will take you live through the first hour of it on the Viking Squad Show. We've got Eric Wilson staying. Jalen Redmond got IRFA'd. Rashawn Gary got traded, and we've got a Jonathan Grenard, market update. The QB carousel keeps spinning. It looks like Tua is going to have a new home. Is Kyler a done deal here in Minnesota? We're going to get to all of it on today's show. We do this every Monday, every Thursday. We are live on the Locked On Vikings channel. Audio is free and available on the Locked On Vikings podcast feed. Where do we start, gentlemen? Where do we start? Let's start with the place where, we always start on days like this by hammering that sound effect. Let's say Eric Wilson. Eric Wilson re-signs. He is retained by the Minnesota Vikings. The same deal Blake Cashman got a couple of years ago. 3 years, up to $22.5 million. $12.5 million of that is guaranteed. And he's not here to get his flowers. That's one of the best signings of the Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah era, Luke Inman.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I feel like, I think it was Alec Lewis reported, kind of more of a 2-year, $13 million deal. So you're talking about $6.5 million to stick around. And I can get on board with that. I think at that price point, to hope he can come back and come close. I know he's coming off a career year, but come close to replicating what he did last year, which was, again, kind of out of this world when you think about they signed him to be a backup that was going to be used on special teams first and foremost. Obviously, he comes in, kind of lights the world on fire with all the quarterback pressures, the run stops, tackles for loss, all that ranked, NFL-wise for linebackers near the top. I understand he's 32, getting a little long in the tooth, but there's really no reason to think he can't come in and have, again, maybe not the same, but at least close to a similar impact on this defense again. And I think from a team building perspective too, which, on this show, we've talked a lot about the last few weeks. Number one, if you didn't bring him back, you're obviously going to have to bring somebody in. I know they wanted to avoid the, Nakobe Dean type of contracts that guys were going to get, almost double of what they just paid Eric Wilson. That's just not in their plans. They're just not in a position to kind of go spend that type of money, at least at linebacker. And then number two, you think about Brian Flores as well. Brian Flores just lost 2 of his starting defensive linemen. We'll get into it. He might lose Jonathan Grenard as well. For him to lose his starting, kind of blitzing, attacking linebacker on top of that for just $6.5 million bucks. That would have felt like a little overkill in my eyes. So now you got to bring back the guy that knows the system. He knows exactly what's going to be asked from him. Most importantly, he knows how to do that at a high level. And that in turn, I think takes a lot off Flores' plate, not having to kind of spend an entire offseason teaching somebody new his scheme again. So I think the continuity, most importantly, is great for both sides. The money on a 2-year deal, I think, is also fair for both sides. And there's always something to be said, too, about, rewarding somebody like Eric Wilson after the season that they, just had. It's a good look for the ownership. It's a good look for the organization. It's a good look for the players, free agents included, I think, take note of things like that. So, a dude that you brought in from Cincinnati all those years ago as a UDFA, now to see this thing come kind of full circle, to see him finally get paid a nice little chunk of change, I think is well-deserved. 6-ish mil, that's about kind of what I expected to do.
Yeah, if he plays out the contract, he'll have spent 2 separate 4-year stints with the organization with like 5 years in between. I don't know if that career arc has ever been duplicated, but Forno, it's tied for the 22nd highest interior linebacker contract. This thing is a bargain, especially when you consider that third year is probably super flexible, super cuttable. It's about what I expected. He led interior linebackers last year in pressures 37, sacks with 6. Felt like a no-brainer. I'm glad they got it done.
Yeah, it's on the surface. Right before I went to bed last night, I'm like, man, that's a lot of money. And one of the reasons why I was a little hesitant on it was because like he's about to go into his age 32 season, and he had a 9th year breakout, which doesn't really feel like something you necessarily reward on the broad scale of kind of how you pay players. You want to reward guys who break out in like year 3, 4, or 5, because theoretically they're going to have a longer future and runway ahead of them. Whereas Wilson, are you going to be able to see this kind of production moving forward, which is what you're paying for? You don't want to pay a guy for what they did. You want to pay a guy for what they're going to do. And that was a big question. And the fact that it's more like a 2-year, $12.5 million deal, kind of a similar setup to how Blake Cashman's was, because they are the exact same basic terms of 3 years, $22.5 million. It makes a little bit more sense. But I think the bigger story coming out with the Eric Wilson signing is the Vikings are going to do a lot of bargain bin shopping. This is a huge signal to all of those guys that, hey, if you play really well, we will pay you. We will give you a second contract. And that in itself, that PR can be way more important than maybe giving in overpay per se to a 32-year-old player like Wilson. Because now, hey, maybe the guy coming off of his rookie deal who underperformed, but there's still a lot of hope for him, will come to Minnesota on a cheap deal. And then he can make a really big impact and potentially get paid down the line.
The other linebacker bit of news, Ivan Pace gets the low tender, which probably means $3.5 million goes to Pace. I can't imagine an offer sheet being extended. Vikings now have their LB3 for now. I would guess a veteran gets added to the mix. Draft pick gets added to the mix. There will probably be 5-6 bodies in there in training camp. But they retain Ivan Pace, who now goes in for the first time in a while as a clear backup. You've got Cashman, you've got Wilson as your starters, Ivan Pace as your number 3. We look elsewhere around the league, and I think the most related move to the Minnesota Vikings is Rashawn Gary getting traded from the Packers to the Cowboys for a 4th-round pick next year. A lot of people excited when Max Crosby went for a pair of first-round picks going to the Ravens. I think that excited people about the Jonathan Grenard market. I think this is a glass of cold water being poured with this Rashawn Gary trade. You can make a great case. Gary is not as good as Grenard. Not as good as Grenard. Kind of fell out of favor in Green Bay. But the contract status is almost identical. 2 years left, very similar APY. The age is identical. And if you're just stacking up statistical production, it's not that dissimilar. So I would say this is bad news for a Jonathan Grenard trade. Probably a step above Gary, probably a day 2 pick. I can't see him fetching a first-round pick. Forno, agree, disagree with that?
I don't think he's going to fetch a first-round pick, but I think he should. And when you take a look at the differences between Gary and Grenard, the biggest one is the Packers were just going to straight up cut him, and the Vikings have no interest in cutting him, but they are interested in a potential move to bring back some draft capital and then also save some salary cap space. When I take a look at the last 8 to 10 years of edge rusher trades to try and get a sense of what the historical precedent will be, the one that stands out to me that is a similar one to where Grenard is at, considering injury history and production, is the Bradley Chubb move, when the Dolphins traded first-round pick, 4th-round pick, and running back Chase Edmonds for Chubb in a 5th. I don't think Grenard gets that much, but when you compare their numbers side by side, Grenard's been more productive than Chubb was through this point of his career. And when you look at how Grenard has played the last 2 years, he had nearly 50 pressures, and he did only have the 3.5 sacks because he just struggled to finish, but pressures mean more in the aggregate than sacks do. Mm-hmm. He was incredibly impressive, and he was this close to being an all-pro in 2024, finishing 6th, where Andrew Van Ginkel got that final spot, getting just a few more votes than he did. I think Grenard should fetch a first based on production, his ability to play in an even or odd front, the ability to generate pressure. He's also got a great frame with over 35-inch arms that really quick get off on the ball. You can do anything that you ask of him and do it at a high level. And he's proved it for 3 straight years. Considering Max Crosby's similar production over the past couple of years, and when you kind of look at historical precedent, he should net a first, but it's the NFL. Nobody really understands the trade market because guys will go for way more than you think and way less than you think all the time. Minka Fitzpatrick just went for a 7th to the Jets. Nobody really knows, but if you want to go by past history, production, and all those factors, I do think he should net a first.
Yeah, you're right, though. I feel like this is the bookend. Like, here's our happy medium. You're right, Sam. Crosby goes for 2 firsts. Gary goes for a 4th. Feels like Grenard, if we're talking about just pure trade value, should obviously land somewhere in the middle of both those guys. Personally, I just think when everything's even, when everybody's healthy, when everything's clicking in Brian Flores' system, Jonathan Grenard is one of the best players, maybe the best player you can make a case on the field for the Vikings. I know he's coming off a down year, injury-riddled season, but even after missing, a third of the season, he still led the team in quarterback pressures, missing 5 games. What does that tell you? He's a game changer when healthy on this defense. So for me, if you're moving on from him, who's a guy who's clearly a core player, a guy you should be building around, I guess I got a lot more questions than answers at that point. You just cleared all this cap space, pay him the extra $5 million pay bump, reward your premium players at premium positions, no less. I'm with you, Forno. Netting a second would make me wildly disappointed, especially knowing how bad we've drafted the last 4 years. The draft is obviously never a sure thing. Obviously, I know Kwesi's gone. Things hopefully is going to look different here in 2026 and beyond in the draft room. But this is a guy who I think is worth a first-round pick minimum all day long. If no one wants to pay that, then keep him. Sleep easy at night and know your pass rush is 3 deep with a stud at the top like Jonathan Grenard.
Well, and let's reset kind of how we've evaluated this alleged raise that Grenard asked for. He has a great case to ask for another $5 million more per year. Great case. Get him up into that top 10, but probably not that much higher based on the priors. The Vikings have cleared $75 million, you guys. They needed to clear about 45 to get cap level. They've cleared about 75 when you take into account restructures for Jefferson, Darisaw, Murphy, and Hawkinson. We'll get more into the Hawkinson bit a little bit later. They're going to cut Jones, Hargrave, and Allen. Ryan Kelly has retired. All of these will be topics on the show. They've cleared the space. They can kick some of it down the road. This should not be financially restrictive unless Jonathan Grenard is coming to the table with an unrealistic ask. If he values himself as a top 3 edge rusher in the league, I don't think I would blink if I were the Vikings. I think I would show him what they believe his market is, offer him the raise that is deserved. Heck, sweeten it even a little bit. But I do think the Vikings have to stand on some ground here. They don't have a lot of money to deal with Forno. They can't just they can't set a new market with Jonathan Grenard at edge. They just can't do it. So maybe this is more on Grenard for asking something that's totally out of scope for the Vikings.
I think you can look at it in 2 different ways. One, if you just want to give him a raise, kind of like how they did with Danielle Hunter a couple times, and just give him $5 million, that's not really something that the Vikings can do based on their salary cap situation because they need to keep about $15 million for draft picks, practice squad, and in-season signings. But they can easily give him a raise and make things better on the salary cap because he's got a base salary of $18.39 million. You add a couple years to the deal, make it an extension, then add a couple more years on top of that just to, sweeten the ability to do restructures later on. And all of a sudden you can take his cap hit, which is $22.15 million this year, and you can turn it into like $8 million. You just saved another $14 million on the salary cap. You appeased your star player. And if you give him 10th edge rusher money, it's $26.5 million average annual value. That's what Nick Bonito makes. And then all of a sudden, now you're really cooking with gas because you gave him nearly $7.5 million average annual value raise. You locked in your best player on defense for the next 4 years, and you made your salary cap situation a whole lot better right now. Like, you can do that. and it can be a huge win for everybody. Plus, if you give him a raise and make it like a 4-year deal worth $26.5 million, you can have the agents frame it as, hey, we just got a 2-year deal with new money that's $35 million a year. So now he gets to play the PR game. You in the building get a win because you're still getting him at 10th edge rusher money. Like, I think that's the easiest bet that you can make because he's been consistent. He's a great leader on your team, and he can do literally everything that you want. I think he's the engine behind this defense, and it would be foolish to give him up for anything less than premium capital, which it doesn't seem like you're going to get.
Yeah, last thing, just real quick to add on to that. A lot of great points, Sam, to your point, or posing the question, what if he is asking for top 3 money? Well, whoever is trading for Jonathan Grenard knows he's going to want a new contract. And if they know that, they probably have a good idea, a good grasp on what kind of money he's asking for. As good as he is, I just, obviously spent 5 minutes, showering him with love and praising all the things he brings to the table. I don't think anybody's going to pay him top 3 edge rusher. Edge rusher is such a premium position. The money these guys make, the Micah Parsons, the Myles Garretts, you name it. As much as we love Jonathan Grenard here in Minnesota, I don't think any of the other 31 other teams are going to want to trade a second plus, I guess, shell that kind of money out for him. So it could be a negotiating tactic for sure. Probably, the truth lies somewhere in the middle for both sides. But again, at the end of the day, it might not just be about draft compensation. It might be about kind of lowering his expectations as far as what his market might look like.
And we got to keep asking the question, okay, you trade Grenard. What is the plan other than just assuming Dallas Turner picks up all the slack? Are you trying to replace him 1-for-1? Or are you just trying to get cheaper at the position? Could be a bargain bin situation. And you look at a lot of the free agents at edge, it's littered with old dudes. You got names. You got Brandon Graham. You got Cameron Jordan, right? You've got Jadeveon Clowney, Khalil Mack. These are old guys. There's not a lot of available free agent edges in their 20s, and the ones that are there are going to be super expensive. So what is the plan? We're going to get into more of that, and also Draymond Jones signs the first big edge deal of the day, 3 years, $39 million with New England. We've also got an Eric Stokes deal in Las Vegas. He leaves the Packers. All the updates and all of the news breaking regarding the Minnesota Vikings and around the league continues on our live tampering show. We will get into some of those restructuring moves, especially the TJ Hawkinson move, which assures that TE1 is back with the purple. We are brought to you in day by Indeed sponsored jobs, workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing. The one position you have to fill, it's still sitting open, and that stresses you out. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire. This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. They help you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, whether it's skills, experience, location. It's all got to be the right fit. You're taking matters into your own hands with Indeed sponsored jobs. You're not hoping, crossing your fingers, knocking on wood, that the right candidate stumbles across your post. You're elevating that post, making sure that it gets to the maximum number of eyeballs. And in the minute we've been talking, companies like yours have made 27 hires around the world on Indeed using sponsored jobs. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching, more time interviewing with Indeed sponsored jobs. Just take all the stress out, cut through the chaos, and use Indeed sponsored jobs. You can get a sponsored job credit of $75 to help you get the premium status your job deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Visit Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast, the Viking Squad Show. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And also be sure to check out Locked On Vikings later tonight. Luke Braun teased this on Thursday on the show. Check out Locked On Vikings. There will be some live programming tonight that you don't want to miss. Let's talk again about those Vikings restructures and what it all means. So again, to recap, the Vikings did basic restructures for Jefferson, Darrisaw, Murphy. These are not the player taking less money. This is the team pressing a button on the contract and just shuffling the money around. The TJ Hawkinson restructure was a little more manual than that saved the Vikings $5 million. I don't know if we know all the details, whether he actually cut his salary by 5. We need to get more details on Hawkinson. But the bottom line is that TJ Hawkinson remains. Now, Inman, we heard, after the season from a couple people, our guy Ron Johnson, Ben Lieber said it. They said, no way, no how. He's gone. He's out of here. I think on this show, you and I, we've lobbied to keep him in the building because, yes, he declined last year. So did Jefferson. So did Addison. Every pass catcher looked bad in last year's offense. I think this is a good retention to keep TJ Hawkinson in the building, even at a pretty high price.
Yeah, I mean, if the conversation was, he's gone at that price point, maybe there's a little bit more substance to that conversation being, I guess essentially asked to be one of, if not the highest paid tight end in the league coming off the year, really 2 years that he's had. But, just take a step back. I feel like all these restructures, Sam, are just kind of part of the bigger plan here, not just to clear cap space for 2026, which they did, but kind of keep your core nucleus intact for 2027 and beyond. Obviously, JJ, Darrisaw, Murphy, they're looked at as part of the core nucleus, the guys they want to build around. They're not going anywhere. So turning their cap hits, essentially into just converted bonus where they just get handed this fat paycheck that's always a win-win for both sides. So that's really helped move the needle on the cap this year and kind of help them get above water, so to speak, actually have some real flexibility and options now when it comes to free agency in the tampering period, obviously, which just started. So the Hawkinson deal, though, it's interesting because, it sounds like it was just a flat out pay cut. I'm with you. I guess we don't have all the details yet. Sounds like it was just a flat out pay cut. In turn, erases the 2027 year on the deal, meaning, this is it for him. He'll be a free agent next year. He'll be able to hit the free agent market, by the way, for the first time since he was drafted in Detroit. Doesn't mean he can't or they won't try to bring him back next year, but, that could look a lot of different ways. But as of now, I think we may have to kind of buckle in, prepare mentally, like this could be the final season for him in Minnesota as it stands now. And who knows, maybe free agency or more likely the draft will help us glean a little bit more info kind of in their game plan, their blueprint, their mindset for tight end in 2027 and beyond, especially if they go use a day 2 pick or an early day 3 pick on a tight end that they think could maybe be the next guy, in that tight end room and get a little younger, get a little cheaper in the process. That'll be kind of interesting to see how, all that plays out. Also, too, just quick side combo, is it really out of this world to think that Josh Oliver couldn't be your tight end 1 in this system? I feel like that never gets talked about. Like, how dare you even think those thoughts? He's a blocking tight end at best, but I wouldn't be shocked, especially for the money they're paying him as a tight end too, that KOC doesn't see a world where Josh Oliver could be your tight end 1, at least for 2027. Just try it out for 1 year and just see what it looks like. Just some food for thought as well as we talk about the Hawkinson deal.
Yeah, I think going into 2024 off of the Hawkinson knee injury, I think we were all pretty optimistic about what Oliver could be for that period of time as your TE1. And my only pushback would be it wasn't that great. It wasn't that great in I think it was Munt and Oliver for 7-8 games. We didn't see high-end tight end play. But there's maybe a world where, okay, you got a young kid in 2027, you got Oliver kind of as your TE1 holding the fort down. Maybe that could play, especially if you're trying to pinch some pennies.
I will say in the passing game, he did look a lot better towards the end. When the Vikings went on a little heater, those last 4 or 5 games, Josh Oliver was catching some touchdown passes and looked a little bit more comfortable, I guess, being in the system now for 2-3 years. You're reverting back to, when he first got here, talking about, he was known as this blocking tight end, and that's definitely his bread and butter. But I'm just saying, even though it's unlikely, it's just funny that we haven't had a conversation about that possibility yet.
Right. Once you get profiled as a blocking tight end, it's hard to shed that stigma. Forno, you haven't established your opinion on Hawkinson yet on this show. Where do you stand? You like that he's back or not?
I love that he's back, and I think we can have multiple conversations about Hawkinson, and all of these things can be true. He was not going to be worth the $21.2 million cap hit. I think giving him a $5 million pay cut and having that concession to void out the final year, which also will take away his ability to count towards the compensatory pick formula. So that's That's a relatively big concession by the Vikings. It was good for both sides because he wasn't going to be able to get more than that on the free agent market. And I also think that his last year, his production was not his fault. I don't think he's quite the guy he was pre-ACL injury, which is fine. That's relatively normal to see a guy just never really 100% come back. But he was having to chip it feels like every other pass route. And when he chips, it's not just a quick push. He's laying in with the shoulder. It takes like a second and a half in order to do that. And then he's way delayed getting in out on his route. And he is a vertical stretch tight end that you want to play in line. You want to run him up the seam. You want to get him on those choice routes. And when you have to chip like that, you can't do those things in rhythm with the quarterback, especially with how the offensive line played last year with the multitude of injuries. And I'll say this about Josh Oliver. I think he could potentially be a good tight end one. It's obvious the Vikings don't view him that way because whenever Hawkinson's been out, Oliver just plays his role, and then the other guy just steps into that tight end 3 spot. So even though he might have the aptitude to do that, the Vikings don't want him to. And I think that says more about the future of the tight end position than anything, because if they don't want him playing a TJ Hawkinson-like role, it's obvious that they don't see him as more than what he's doing right now, which your mileage may vary on that, but the Vikings are telling you that they don't want to use him as this dynamic pass catcher. They want him as a 6th offensive lineman. They want him as a run blocker. And quite frankly, if you were to get rid of Hawkinson, you aren't upgrading in 26. You may upgrade for future years, but you're not going to find anybody better, especially with the salary cap situation that you're in, because you take over $12 million dead. Kenyon Sadiq might be better long-term, but it's highly doubtful that he would be better in 2026. And then do you really want to spend a premium asset on the tight end position in the draft, considering other than outliers, you're usually drafting tight end for the next team. That's why you make the TJ Hawkinson trade. So it's a very layered conversation, but I think the idea that he's just bad, I think is a little wrong, I guess might be the way to say it, because there's so much context into why his production dipped this past year.
I think that today the Vikings have filled 2 potential holes. They have solidified the inside linebacker with Eric Wilson and Ivan Pace. You're set there. That's no longer a huge need. TJ Hawkinson returns. That's no longer a huge need for 2026. So we're checking boxes right now. These internal retentions, that's big. Aaron Jones probably going to be released. We've been talking about, do you add another back next to Jordan Mason? Well, we've got a little bit of movement on that front around the league. The defending Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker off the board. He's going to Kansas City. The Chiefs add a ball player. This is a pretty rich running back class, as they tend to be at running back, because the deals are short and teams don't want to extend them. So you still got ETN. I think Breece Hall's off the board as well. He's staying in New York. Javonte Williams is off the board. He's staying with the Cowboys. So drying up a little bit. And will they necessarily make a move at running back? Rico Dowdle, I think, is still out there. Inman, do you foresee the Vikings making a splash or a ripple in the running back market?
Well, just knowing everything that we know, just collecting all the information that we've gotten the past 2-3 weeks, what they've done with this cap, clearing all this cap space, restructuring, cutting guys, cutting some big names as well. When you're talking about the running back position, just in general, a more devalued position compared to some premium positions like edge, obviously cornerback, things like that, I don't think they're going to do much. I really don't. And again, I mean, the big name just went off the board. Kenny Walker, he was kind of the top tier stud. I know, again, you got Travis Etienne out there, obviously a little bit bigger name as well. But Kenneth Gainwell, Rico Dowdle, I mean, I could see one of those two coming in on a 1 or 2 year kind of pretty affordable deal. They're still going to go draft a guy, though, I feel like, either way. I don't know how early. I don't know what round. I don't know what guy they're targeting. But at some point, they're going to bring in a rookie in this draft class, as I think every team should do from a team building standpoint, by the way. I mean, the way these teams just kind of churn these guys out, ground and pound them for 3, 4, 5 years, and then just kind of move on. And especially knowing the talent influx year after year, I think this running back draft class compared to others is a little bit down this year, but nonetheless, you can still find guys that can come in and contribute. I'm not asking you to be a 25, carry type of dude. Yes, granted, it's harder to find some of these young rookies to come in and be able to pass block, pass protect, catch balls out of the backfield, but there's talent in this draft class. I don't think they're going to make a wave, Sam. Maybe a ripple. Again, Kenneth Gainwell just seems to be a guy, connect a lot of dots with. You bring him in and you go draft a guy. Also, too, don't forget, they got Xavier Scott in there as well, who I'm not saying is a world breaker, but he flashed a little bit as well, and he's only entering year 3 now, and I think they probably want to give him a fair crack, at least getting some real legitimate reps in 2026 as well. So keep that in mind too.
Yeah, Gainwell kind of feels like a nice bridge, a bridge running back to your rookie. Get him for 1 year, probably affordably. Forno, thoughts?
Yeah, I think like up to $15 million a year for Walker, it was just a little too much for the Vikings to be able to pallet. But this is the kind of back that people would have wanted the Vikings to sign to pair with Jordan Mason, where you got the little bit of thunder and lightning combination. I think they might even go down to like tier 3 of this running back class in free agency in order to kind of find one. And one guy I really like is Sean Tucker from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I loved him coming out of Syracuse. He didn't run at the combine due to something medical. And I thought he could have run in the 4.3s because when you watch him at Syracuse, he could do a little bit of everything, probably best prioritized as a zone back where you can just do the one cut and go. And when he was actually given an opportunity in that deep backfield last year against the Bills, over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, and absolutely cratered my dynasty league team from even making the
He was good. Yeah,
he was good.
Yeah.
You could probably get him for a couple $1 million a year, which is right in the Vikings wheelhouse. He complements Jordan Mason really well. And that in turn will give you an opportunity to say, hey, maybe we can trust this guy long-term, but if we don't, it's inexpensive and we don't have to really worry about the ramifications. I will throw this out there. There is the veterans exception for a guy like Ty Chandler, where you can pay him like close to $3 million, but he only counts as the veteran minimum. The Vikings have used this in the past. I remember they did it with Oli Udoh a few years ago. I think they did it last year, but I don't remember who. That is something that they could end up doing to bring that guy back. But the thing is, if you cut him, I believe it counts for like the full nearly $3 million on the cap. So you have to keep them the whole year in order to use that. So that's something to at least think about.
I was just going to throw in too, as far as Sean Tucker goes, only been in the league 3 years, 24 years old. So it feels like with these running backs, after 2, 3, 4 years go by, we kind of just throw them to the fire. Like, okay, they're old. The wear and tear on the tread on the tires is gone. But 24 years old, he's still got a lot of juice left in the tank. And I'm with you, Tyler. When I sat down and watched some Bucs games and he was the guy, he had some juice, man. He looked pretty good. So a name that I haven't heard thrown out there. So I'm glad you mentioned him.
The Vikings got word of Ryan Kelly's retirement. Still crickets on Harrison Smith. We'll talk about that opening at center and what can happen in free agency when we return on the Squad Show. Brought to you today by everybody's favorite Gametime. We can stream anything in this world. We can order food in minutes, and we've got like the sum of human intelligence in our pockets. And yet buying tickets can still be a hassle. There's these hidden fees, jumping prices, and you buy on some of these third-party places, and there's scams, and there's got to be a better way. Well, you got to use the Gametime app. It gives fans the advantage and makes getting tickets simple. Trust me, I'm checking it all the time, looking for great value, and almost always finding it in the Gametime app. You get the panoramic view from the seat, and there's no hidden fees, and the zone deals are awesome because you pick the section. Gametime picks the seats for extra awesome savings. 2 taps, get great seats locked in, fast, easy, done. You got the Wild and the Wolves making playoff pushes right now. Make sure you're in the building and use Gametime and take the guesswork out of buying those tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. All right, before we get to Ryan Kelly talk here in the Squad Show, let's just do a quick catch-up. Around the league, we got Jalen Watson going to the Rams. That's a cornerback off the board. And again, the Vikings probably not spending big at cornerback. I wouldn't project, but Rob Brzezinski is the man in charge, and maybe he goes big. What else do we have? We've got a lot of news that broke earlier this morning, and I think that the Tua news is particularly interesting because he's already been linked to Arizona, which means that I'm sorry, he's already been linked to Atlanta. I don't know why I can't talk. That is a location off the board for Kyler Murray. We also heard from at least one source that Geno Smith is interested in replacing Tua in Miami. That's another location off the board for Kyler Murray. More tea leaves linking Murray to the Minnesota Vikings. That's all the steam right now. Inman, I would guess at 11:07 Central, whenever we wrap this show up, probably when Kyler Murray's going to sign with the Vikings. Would you say?
Well, that's just how it works, Sam. I mean, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and that's just that just seems to be our luck. But it feels like, yeah, I know we're starting to get some steam as far as some quarterback team connections. Obviously, you know, when somebody like Shefty reports some of these things, there's some real substance behind it. I think it's interesting. No news on Kyler Murray, though, just as far as like where he's thinking outside of what we've already heard and discussed and talked about on the last episode. You know what I'm kind of intrigued about and interested that nobody's talked about? Who's going to Arizona? Kyler's going somewhere else, maybe Minnesota. We've heard all these other big quarterbacks talked about, you know, being linked to Atlanta and Miami and, you know, filling in the shoes for Tua and whoever it may be, Kirk Cousins and whatnot. I haven't heard one team or one quarterback talk about this guy, player X, quarterback X, going to play for Arizona. So I don't know if there's just no interest over there. Maybe I've missed some news that's kind of flown under the radar a little bit the past few days, but I think it's just intriguing that we've connected a lot of dots for a lot of quarterbacks, a lot of teams. I don't know who's going to play quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals next year.
Malik Willis will. That's the rumor because
Is that the
obviously, yeah, well, he played for Matt LaFleur. Mike LaFleur is in Arizona. That connection's been made multiple times. And it sounds like Miami might not be able to afford Willis, especially now that they've officially cut Tua. They're going to have to take $99 million in dead cap over the next 2 years.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, they got to eat a lot of this Kyler cap. I think the whole thing as far as Malik Willis to Minnesota was like, we just can't afford the number one quarterback out there. As far as price point goes, Tua is going to be cheaper. Kyler's going to be super cheap. Kirk Cousins is going to be cheap. Joe Flacco is going to be cheap. They're all going to be cheap. Geno Smith's going to be cheap. Malik Willis is the guy that if you want the best guy, you got to go pay for him. So eating Kyler's contract and then go spending all that money on Malik Willis, I'm not saying it's not feasible or possible. It certainly is, but would be kind of contradicting, I think, a little bit as far as just cap numbers go. But yeah, as far as just player and connection and coach fit goes, I mean, I could definitely connect a lot of dots with that. That makes sense too.
Wild Jalen Phillips contract just dropped as well. 4 years, 120 to the Panthers for a guy that's been pretty injured in his career. That's an awfully big commitment. We'll keep watching that edge class and watching the quarterback news dropping. How about Ryan Kelly, though, announcing his retirement? The odds were this was going to happen with the concussions that he's dealt with. We knew that he was on a razor's edge with his career, and I think he suffered 3 this year with the Minnesota Vikings. So they are now in search of a center. I did just a little double check. Is Blake Brandel a real option here? From weeks 5 to 11, when he was the primary center, in that span, he was the 35th ranked center out of 37 in the league, and he allowed the second most pressures in the league. I thought there were good moments for him, Forno. I don't think Blake Brandel can be plan A at center. You could be looking into McGovern, looking into Linderbaum. I don't, unless you get one of those 2 high-enders and spend a crap load of money, I don't honestly love this free agent class at center. What do you think the Vikings do?
I don't love this class at center either. And I'll tell you, I don't love it at these prices. These prices are wild. Connor McGovern, $13 million a year. Sean Ryan, I believe, just got 11. I think Cade Mays is going to creep up close to 13. Linderbaum getting like 20 to 22 million, which feels like what the rumors are. I don't love that either. And quite frankly, if Will Fries just plays like closer to the level that he was at with the Colts and is more of a constant, because he wasn't bad last year, but he certainly wasn't worth the 18.5 average annual value that you gave him. And then you get Donovan Jackson taking a big step forward in year 2, then center all of a sudden, I'm not going to say it's devalued, but you can live with a guy who's still trying to learn at the position, which, let's be real, Blake Brandel never played center before last year. So I think we should give him just a little bit of grace. But I do agree with you, Sam. If you go in with just Brandel at the position, that's not necessarily your best bet. I think bringing in a developmental guy to pair with him and Juergens, who did play very well toward the end of last year, even though he kind of got benched for Brandel after the Steelers game where he blew a couple of blocks. I think that might be where you're going. And I'll say this with the offensive line. One of the biggest pieces of the offensive line is good quarterback play. Sam Darnold made that offensive line look significantly better than it was because he was able to maneuver around pressure. He was able to handle guys in his face, handle pressure. McCarthy, Brosmer, and Wentz were all bad. They were all bad at maneuvering around pressure. They were holding the ball way too long. And then they would take these brutal sacks. I remember against the Steelers, Carson Wentz just rolls out to his right, making the path for TJ Watt that much easier just to get the sack. That's what we were dealing with last year. If you have average quarterback play, you probably eliminate about 13, 14 sacks out of that 60 last year. So I do think you need to work on center. I don't think that they're going to work on center with these prices unless you convince like an Elton Jenkins, who I think is a free agent, to come in for like Ryan Kelly money. Then maybe we can cook with gas a little bit. But it's probably going to be Brandel, Juergens, and a guy you take in the draft as a developmental option.
It's such a good point, though. Chicken or the egg, right? Like we talk about, this quarterback needs better protection. They got to go spend a bunch of money on a premium left tackle and got to go draft a first-round guard and things like that. When you got good, competent quarterback play, veteran quarterback play, you're totally right, Tyler. Like you're getting the ball out on time. You're getting the ball out quickly. It just makes not only the offensive line look better, but it just alleviates a lot of pressure as well, not to mention the communication factor as well. The good news for the Vikings, of the 5 offensive line positions, they got 4 of them locked in stone. Write them in Sharpie. The problem is the 5th one of the more important positions, obviously, at center, especially barring whoever is going to come in and play quarterback for this team. So, Forno, you kind of went over to the options. I know we talked about free agent centers. I think last week, Connor McGovern already brought back by the Buffalo Bills on a pretty hefty contract. I know this salary cap keeps going up every year. So initially there's a sticker shock to some of these deals, but I will say for center specifically, it does seem very rich. Obviously Tyler Linderbaum probably not going to be in the plans, just too rich for that kind of money as well. So I'm with you, man. I think it's Brandel. I think it's Juergens, and I think it's a day 2 or early day 3 kind of center. That they kind of, I think, target and hone in on that fits KOC style and what he wants to do, knowing whatever quarterback's going to be under the helm. But not ideal going into training camp. The good news is, though, hopefully, like Tyler mentioned, hopefully who's ever at center, you got 2 really good building blocks playing next to him, and then obviously 2 kind of bookend tackles to kind of alleviate some pressure as well.
McGovern, $13 million per year with Buffalo. Thanks for that note gold sound in the chat. Missed that over the weekend. Yeah, so that leaves Linderbaum probably as the top remaining target. You mentioned Cade Mays, Forno. He's going to get overpaid because he had a help. Like, you've got unhealthy free agents like James Daniels, Ethan Posich coming off injuries. Luke Fortner had a super small sample size. That's a scary pay. Cade Mays is healthy. He's in his 20s and he's played the position. He's probably going to get the bag, and I'm not sure that he's going to be requisite of that money, but just supply and demand, he's probably going to get paid a bundle. So I think the Vikings are in a bad spot. I really, it's too bad what happened with Ryan Kelly, and I think he's made the right move for him. I think it's going to be a challenging fix unless they really want to pony up here at center, and they've got enough money for what? 1 big splash, 2 big splashes. You've got to be super discerning in where you're going to spend this capital. They can't splash everywhere like they did last year.
Sam, if you would do me a favor and play the sounder for me.
He ain't going to Arizona.
No, he's not. Malik Willis is going to the Miami Dolphins, which isn't a humongous surprise, even though I said he was linked to the Cardinals, because John Eric Sullivan and Jeff Hafley both came from the Green Bay Packers. So we'll see it's 3 years, $67.5 million. So $22.5 million per year. Honestly, that's a pretty palatable deal.
Yeah, that's pretty cheap, man. That's pretty affordable. Knowing the going, I mean, that's like a Justin Fields type deal. So good for him. Obviously getting paid. Love that. Miami's got their new young quarterback for Jeff Hafley. I'm just going to circle back, though, one more time, and then we'll move on. Who is playing quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals? I don't get is it Flacco? Like, who is it? I'm very intrigued and very interested.
Might be Geno.
Could be Geno. Yeah, could be Geno.
Because Geno was rumored to want Miami, and now that's off the board, evidently. Geno to Minnesota. Is that dream dead? I don't think it should be dead. I am higher on Geno than most other people. Geno or Kyler both coming at that veteran minimum, it sounds like. Do you have a horse in this race, Inman, between the two of them, Kyler or Geno Smith right now? Knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, apples to apples. We had this conversation, I want to say 2 weeks ago. I'm on the Geno train for a lot of different reasons. Over the last 2 weeks, I have slowly put on the purple glasses. I'm drinking the purple Kool-Aid. The price point of Kyler Murray, and I know Geno's going to be cheap too, but being able to get the former number 1 overall pick. I know you kind of have to bend some rules here because I don't think it makes the perfect amount of sense as far as a fit goes with KOC's offense and system. But I think it's just too enticing, man. I think it's just so fun to think about getting the former number 1 overall pick with a super high ceiling. And think about just him in this type of offense and being able to pay him nothing. I mean, pennies on the dollar, virtually free as far as quarterbacks go. So right now, I've slowly talked myself into the Kyler buzz. But at the end of the day, Sam, I would be more than okay with Geno Smith coming in, competing with JJ McCarthy, probably starting until he either, whatever happens, gets hurt or, maybe has a couple down weeks, however that looks, but still being an open competition with JJ McCarthy. I think there's a lot of positives in that scenario as well, not just for 2026, but the potential of JJ McCarthy in 2027 and beyond. Kyler, you bring him in, it's the Kyler show for 2026, point blank. And maybe the end of JJ McCarthy if he has at least here in Minnesota, if he has a good season, because obviously at that point, you're probably looking at bringing Kyler back on a monster deal in 2027 as well. So pros and cons to both. 2 weeks ago, you asked me, it's Geno. Today, I'm leaning more Kyler. But again, I think you can kind of talk yourself in to both scenarios either way.
Forno?
I'm a big Geno guy. The one thing that kind of doing a film study on both of these guys is, one, Geno wasn't necessarily good last year, but I don't even know if he was a top 5 issue with that offense. It was a train wreck, starting from Chip Kelly and how he used spacing in the NFL, which is significantly different from what he was doing at Ohio State, to the travesty of the offensive line, John Spytek having to watch film with rookies because they weren't getting enough from the coaching staff. It was just mitigated disaster for the Raiders last year. And then you have Kyler, who doesn't fit anything what Kevin O'Connell wants other than he has arm talent. He does not want to throw over the middle of the field. He's 5'10", and you have to have him so far back in the pocket in order for him to see over those offensive linemen. Because remember, we talk about Blake Brandel being a tall center at 6'7". Jalte Froholt was 6'7" as his center in Arizona. So you can actually use that as an apples to apples comparison. But O'Connell, with the reporting from Alec Lewis, did take away a lot of the middle of the field concepts last year to make things easier for McCarthy. We have seen him showing a willingness to adapt to whatever quarterback is playing. Will he want to go to an air raid style attack for Kyler Murray? Or if you bring in Geno, who is going to turn the ball over a little bit more, he is going to give you a little bit of a limited scope when it comes to mobility, but he's going to do everything you want in attacking the middle of the field, not being afraid to fit tight windows, and really wanting to stretch the field and attack every blade of grass. Which route is he going to take? They're going to cost $1.3 million unless somebody wants to offer a big deal to either one, which I don't really see happening. That's going to be the interesting thing here. Do you want to go with the fit, or do you want to go with overall talent, which is Kyler? I don't know, but I would rather take the guy who fits the offense and will maximize the receivers better, which is what I think Geno will do more than Kyler. And the whole idea is redshirting JJ McCarthy or giving him competition, right? Because you want him to be the franchise guy. If you bring in Kyler, to me, that's a signal that you're done with McCarthy and you're testing out Kyler to see if he's the long-term option. And I think that Geno makes a little bit more sense from let's see if we can still salvage this thing with McCarthy.
Geno takes a lot of heat because he was drafted in the first round for the Jets, coming out of West Virginia all those years ago. He was terrible in that Jets organization, like every player or quarterback seems to be the last couple decades. But Dude was a dog, dude, in Seattle for 3 years. Dude, for one, I forget if it was 2022 or 23, but got some MVP votes. I mean, that tells you how good of a season he was having there. And you ask any Seattle Seahawks fans as well, they really respected and appreciated what he did. A lot of fourth quarter comebacks in there as well. He is the more competent, higher floor, can run your offense, can get the ball to your superstar receivers like Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Get rid of the ball quickly. We just had a conversation about a competent quarterback play helps your offensive line. It's going to make your offensive line look better. Higher floor for sure with Geno Smith. And again, I would not be disappointed at all. Obviously, a higher ceiling with Kyler Murray.
Yeah, people really hate Geno. In the circles that I've been chiming in saying, hey, let's consider this. No one is on the Geno train. And I just think that I think you're favoring Kyler by too much. If you want to say, yeah, I'll give the edge to Kyler. I just think you are underestimating how good Geno Smith was in Seattle. And you are putting too much weight on the 1 year he had in Las Vegas, which was a dumpster fire season. I can't ignore how good the deep ball was in Seattle, how good the pocket mobility was, how healthy he stayed. Kyler's not stayed healthy. That is objective. Like whatever city he's in, his health history is going to follow him. Geno's had a little better luck with that, even though he's age 35. A couple more updates. Isaiah Likely to the Giants. Michael Pittman traded from the Colts after that big deal for Alec Pierce. We'll keep the updates coming as the squad show rolls on. What's going on with Harrison Smith? What's the plan at safety? That's coming up right after this. All right, very quick pause, and we're back on the Vikings squad show. So we've got the Ryan Kelly retirement news. We don't have any whispers on Harrison Smith, not even like someone on Twitter saying sources within the organization believe that Smith is leaning toward the. No, not even that, Inman. Not even has Harrison Smith even opened his phone since the final game of the season? Has he even thought about this at all? What is the timeline here? Because the Vikings have some decisions to make at safety.
Timeline is for Harrison Smith. The timeline is whatever the timeline wants. He wants it to be, I feel like, at this point. Obviously, at a certain point, at a certain juncture in this offseason, they're going to have to just assume, and I think they should already be doing this, assume that Harrison Smith is not coming back. If he can come back or wants to come back in some capacity, you kind of already know based off last year's Harrison Smith, a little bit longer in the tooth, maybe not as much juice in the tank, that he's probably not going to be a full-time starter week in and week out. So you kind of already have an idea, plan B, if he does want to come back in some capacity, that you're still going to need some sort of replacement, whether that's a free agent, whether that's drafting a kid like Dylan Thieneman at 18 or somebody else on day 2, whatever that may be. They just have to go into this assuming Harrison Smith will not be back next year. And it's just a bonus if he does come back, because I feel like, as good as Harrison Smith was in his prime, what he can still add, even though he's a little bit longer in the tooth, not quite as maybe explosive and doesn't get downhill quite as much or as better as he used to. What he adds in not only the communication stuff, pre-snap and post-snap, but also just being this savvy veteran that can. I mean, let's be honest. They're probably going to draft a secondary player in the first 2 rounds. I feel like the value that he brings to the table, almost as this Terrence Newman type of coach on the field, on and off the field, is worth its weight in spades and gold. So I feel like assume that he doesn't come back. If he does, hey, that's great. You're playing with house money, even though it's not the same Harrison Smith that we saw, obviously, in his peak, 4 or 5 years ago.
Secondary breaking news: James Pierre.
Okay.
2 years, $8.5 million. James Pierre had the second highest coverage grade in the league last year on PFF in a rotational 408 snaps. He's 29 years old, undrafted out of Florida Atlantic. He spent 6 years with Pittsburgh. And raise your hand if you were today years old when you found out about James Pierre being a player in this league, because that's not someone on a lot of people's radar. This is a good CB3 value signing. 6'2", 185. Those are some physical tools there. Forno, thoughts?
I really like the signing. This is trying to find a guy who just did not get a ton of time and a ton of opportunities in the defense that he played in, and giving him opportunity just like they gave Isaiah Rodgers. This is the same type of move. And I think Pierre, with those tools, now he gives you somebody on the outside that you feel a lot more comfortable with. And literally anybody at cornerback is going to be a better tackler than Isaiah Rodgers last year. So I like the idea of giving a guy with some size, which you don't have in that cornerback room as it is. And he's got good coverage skills. So now you have three guys that you can theoretically count on in that room. And the fact that Murphy and Rodgers didn't get hurt last year was in itself a miracle. But now you might actually see them go more into a standard nickel package when they did a lot more big nickel and just stayed in base last year. And I think maybe the next evolution of what this defense is going to include a lot more of those three cornerback looks. And look, the Vikings are going to have to take chances like this. They're going to have to take risks. They're not going to be able to pay $15 to $20 million a year for Reek Woolen like I was hoping that they were going to do. They're not going to be able to pay for Kenneth Walker. You're going to have to take calculated shots. And I think this is a really good one, albeit on a very small sample size, but you're only giving $8.5 million over 2 years. This is exactly what they should be doing. So the general idea of the move, A+. Will it work? I'm excited to find out.
Remember those
special
3-4 years when, we as Vikings fans, we'd get to the free agency window and Rick Spielman would not do anything for like the first 3-4 days, right? And then it was just like a kind of a day two type of guy, or like a backup type of dude. Like the big splashy signing was a Derek Cox, a cornerback, like a CB3, CB4. I feel like this is the offseason. The Wilfs are just not going to be in, I feel like, a lot of conversations with making a lot of splashy moves. The Tyler Lindenbaums, the Tariq Woolens, as much as we've talked about him on this show, the Kenny Walkers, things like that. They're trying to clear this cap space. This is a good signing, though, for what they're trying to do in that capacity, because they just need warm bodies in that cornerback room. They just need dudes that know how to play football in this Brian Flores scheme. I think Flores was there in 2022.
Yep.
So he's played with him. He knows what he's getting. Obviously, if he was this superstar cornerback, he'd be making 15, 20 mil a year, not 4.5, but they got a warm body in there. Last year, it was Fabian Monroe or Dwight McGlothern week to week. Now they got some more competition in there. And hopefully a guy who, to Forno's point, can come in and at least compete for that Jeff Okudah kind of cornerback 3 spot that they had last year. So I like it. Cheap, affordable, dude who knows this Flores system and has also played in the league at a somewhat high level, we'll call it, for the last 4 or 5 years.
And
nice
one more
upgrade
thing
on
quick.
Okudah. Yeah.
He played for new DBs coach Gerald Alexander last year in Pittsburgh.
Oh,
so there's continuity.
There you go.
And Flores, he was under the Flores, and Flores was that high-ranking assistant back in 22. Pierre would have been there at that time as well. So you've checked another box. You've got a CB3. Probably going to add a draft pick to that room, and still got to have a pipeline. The short-term free agent signings are nice. That'll put a Band-Aid on it. You've still got Isaiah Rodgers in a contract year. You've still got to have a future at corner. So they're not done, but you've now got a warm body in the room, like Inman said. So now you've devoted, I don't know what the cap figures are. You probably devoted about $8 to $10 million in cap if they backloaded these deals for this year. You've still got a little bit of room to play with. We're assuming a vet minimum at quarterback. So what's next? What is the next move for the Minnesota Vikings still today? I think there's a very good chance that we see a Jalen Nailor for $12 million a year gone from Minnesota. I think you could stand to add a wide receiver. Maybe that's not today's move. Maybe that's in the next couple of days. I think you need another body at defensive tackle. I think you need another body at edge rusher. And we talked about Harrison Smith's murky future. You might still need a safety. So you still need to supplement this roster. What's next? What do you want to see checked off the box next, Forno?
Give me a safety. Give me somebody that I can feel confident about playing 800 snaps. I don't need somebody who's elite. I just want somebody who's solid. I want somebody who I can rely on, because I don't want to go into the draft and have to force safety at 18. Because quite frankly, after Caleb Downs, I'm not sold that any safety is going to be worth the 18th overall pick. I want to go in there And I want to feel comfortable just taking the best player and adding young talent to this roster that desperately needs it. A guy that I really like, Andre Sisco. You'll get him at a discount. He's got really good ball skills. He's a guy that can play over the top, which allows Josh Metellus to come down into the box a little bit more instead of having to play a deep half or a deep third. And it gives you a little bit more flexibility in that way. I would want to see a little bit better talent in the safety room before we go anywhere else because of what the draft looks like and because of the situation we have at safety. I know they like Jay Ward. Do we like Jay Ward? I don't know. Definitely not in the slot. We already tried that 2 years ago. But that's the one position I want to feel a little bit more comfortable at going into the draft process because, quite frankly, I don't want to have to force it at 18. And right now, that's kind of what we have to do.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I don't think we have another Vikings move to report. Let's get an expedited prospect of the day from Luke Inman before we end the show.
Well, we kind of been highlighting some more day 2 picks as of late, early day 3. Some guys you can maybe find later in the drafts, a little bit better value. I figured today, especially with Tyler in attendance, it'd be perfect time to go back into the first round with pick 18 and finally talk about this guy. This dude has been linked to the Vikings specifically. I know he's in the 4-0 fan club, if you will. Clemson cornerback Avion Terrell. If you don't know, younger brother to the Falcons stud corner, by the way, AJ Terrell. So right out the gate, you kind of already like the genes, right? The NFL mental makeup, if you will. And in a lot of ways, too, I think he plays similar to AJ, too. Very feisty, very energetic, despite him being undersized. And that's what you're going to hear the most about as far as like the knocks go, the cons. That is kind of, it feels like the one, and I'm not going to say only knock, but it feels like kind of the glaring kind of downfall for him as far as being an NFL draftable prospect. 5'11", 190. He's slender. He's got that slender build to him, not super long and lanky. Teams are just by default automatically going to try to probably pick on him with some of those 50-50 balls and get him matched up on, bigger receivers, which is fair. So you got to live with that part. But outside of that, if you can swallow that part of the equation, when it comes to everything else, and the boxes you want checked for your cornerback, your ideal cornerback in the NFL, I feel like this guy's got it. A great, fluid, in man coverage, sideline to sideline guy on those drag routes, incredibly smart, instinctual in zone, good kind of clicking close on the ball. Undersized, I know, but still one of the better tackling cornerbacks that you're going to find in this class anyways. And I think, what I love maybe the most about him, there's always one common denominator, I feel like, when you watch really good cornerbacks at any level, and that's the energy, that's the feistiness, chirping in your face, the swag that he plays with. He is ready, for any challenge, to go toe-to-toe with anybody, ready to go to battle from snap 1 of the game to snap 65. He just plays with those, I'll call them RPMs. Those RPMs are ramped up with him all game long, and he's got the talent and the ball skills, by the way, too, to back it up. Led the country in forced fumbles over the last 3 years for all cornerbacks. 5 forced fumbles alone just last year, 11 pass breakups. So he gets his hands on the ball. He makes life tough for any wideout, even the wideouts that are going to be bigger than him. He makes you earn it. So I know people are going to look at him. He's undersized, probably say he's more of a nickel corner, which he can most certainly do. But I think of him as kind of that Trent McDuffie type of role, or mold, I should say. Even though he's undersized, he's going to be just fine on the outside. He can earn his keep. You can feel good about leaving him out on the outside for most of the game. And in turn, for the Vikings specifically, feel good about sliding Byron Murphy inside too when you see fit. So Vikings need, youth at corner. We've talked about that in the worst way. They need an influx of talent in the worst way. They haven't had a guy that they've been able to develop into a true cornerback one since Xavier Rhodes. So it's just time to replenish that add some premium first round talent into the back end of that defense, and let people sleep on him all they want because of the size. That's fine. But I'm telling you, you're getting somebody very polished and very plug and play day one type of starter that I see in the league for a long time. So Tyler, I know he's your guy. He's been your guy for a while. Please add on to anything that I already mentioned. 21 years old, by the way, which is even more impressive when you think about he was starting at Clemson or at least get major run over 400 snaps as an 18-year-old. That's how they thought of him. So playing against some of the best competition in the country. So I think he's pretty safe. So, sitting at pick 18, right, back half of the first round, it's about as safe as you can get when you're talking about NFL type of talent at that cornerback position. Makes a lot of sense for the Vikings, I feel like, at pick 18. And it's probably why you've seen him linked to the Vikings in a lot of mock drafts that we read as well.
Speaking of mock drafts, 67 of 245 industry mock drafts I've collected since January 1st have been Avion Terrell. It's 25%. I don't care that he's small. I care about the dog. And he's got all the dog in the world in him. And you know what? Even being at 5'11", he's got over 31-inch arms. So when he does attack the football, he's not going to be T-Rex arming it. He's going to be able to attack it and get into it. This guy can play any type of coverage. He can play inside. He can play outside. And I love the way he plays the game. He plays the game very similar to who my guy was last year, Quincy Riley. And Riley was very good for the Saints. I don't care about the Clemson cornerback thing. You scout the player, not the helmet. He would be an instant plug and play kind of guy for the Vikings. And with this Pierre signing, you wouldn't have to force it, and you could let him get there at his own pace, kind of like how they did with Mike Hughes pre-ACL injury. He was starting to get there in 2018 before then, and then his career went downhill, honestly, because of the injury. So Terrell would be a great fit for what Flores wants to do, and he's got the production to prove it.
I know we got to go here, Sam, but if he was 2 inches taller, 15 pounds heavier, I feel like he'd be talked about as cornerback 1.
Top 5 pick.
And I was going to say a lock top 10 pick, but yes, be talked about as a top 5 pick. That's just how clean and kind of how polished he is as a prospect coming out. And obviously such a very important premium position, a position that, again, we just saw Trent McDuffie get paid that monster contract. This position is getting very expensive year by year when you got a premium one, which means if you can draft a guy and get good production and good talent on a rookie deal, you're saving yourself a lot of money when it comes to kind of team building aspect of things as well too. So something else to think about after, again, just to note that McDuffie monster deal makes me kind of more enticed about drafting a good corner in the first round as well.
I think we got to it all. We got to the Jonathan Grenard trade market. Tons of breaking news around the league. Talked quarterback potential. Kyler Murray's to the Vikings still very much on the table. Eric Wilson re-signed. Hawkinson back. Pierre in the mix. Ryan Kelly retired. That was a meaty show. The only thing we didn't really touch on, Jalen Redmond. Vikings made the most obvious move of the offseason, and they IRFA'd Jalen Redmond. I love a good IRFA. Just a free roll to bring back like the best player on the defense. Pretty fun. We'll have a lot to talk about on Thursday. Vikings will probably have a quarterback by then, and we'll have a much better idea of where the roster stands as free agency officially starts. The unofficial tampering is underway in full force, and we thank Forno for his work. Check him out on Twitter at @TheRealForno. Check out Luke Inman at Luke_Spinman, and we will be back with you 3 days from now. Stay tuned to Locked On Vikings, where Luke Braun has all the updates for you. Appreciate you watching, listening, commenting, and subscribing, and we'll catch you next time.